Sure. Here's section 1 of the script, with a minimum of 760 words, written in a tight, high-quality, emotionally immersive style that follows the infidelity short story format. No scene descriptions, no padding, just focused, emotionally rich narrative, perfect for a faceless video voiceover. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to a marriage was yelling. Silence, I learned, is far worse. It creeps in slowly, so gently you almost don't notice it until you're sitting across from someone who once made your heart race, and now you're just two strangers sharing a mortgage and a child. That's where we were. Me, Daniel, and Owen, our sweet, bright-eyed boy who was about to turn 8. And that birthday, I thought, would be like every other one. Balloons, cake, forced smiles, and a husband making up for his emotional absence with expensive gifts. I started decorating the night before. Owen was already asleep, his little hands still holding onto the drawing he made of our family, 3 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. I stared at it longer than I should have. There was something innocent in it, something painful. I wasn't sure what was worse, pretending everything was fine for his sake or accepting that it wasn't. Daniel had texted he'd be late, but I'll be there, I promise. That promise meant very little after years of seeing work win every time. When he walked in just after dawn with tired eyes and a fake smile, I knew he'd been somewhere else entirely. He kissed my cheek like I was a co-worker, not his wife, and handed Owen a new bike, still in the box. He didn't notice that Owen didn't light up. He just nodded, polite, and said, "Thanks, Dad." We had cake after lunch. I lit the candles. Owen squinted, thoughtful. I asked, "What are you wishing for?" He smiled, then said, "I wish Mommy and Daddy would stop hiding things." There was laughter, nervous and light, but my hands froze mid-clap. Daniel looked away. Owen had no idea what he'd just done. Or maybe he did. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself children say odd things. But that night, while Owen slept and Daniel scrolled through his phone on the couch, I watched him. Not for how he looked at me, but for how he didn't. His body was present. His mind was elsewhere. I asked him something random, something small. Did he remember what Owen wanted for dinner tomorrow? He blinked twice before answering. Spaghetti, right. He guessed wrong. It was tacos. Owen's favorite. He told us both just yesterday. Later, in bed, I lay beside a man I didn't know how to reach anymore. The silence between us wasn't peaceful, it was full of everything we weren't saying. I remembered when we used to talk until 2 a.m. about nothing and everything. When did that stop? When did we become roommates? The next day, while doing laundry, I picked up Daniel's work shirt. A faint scent clung to it, not mine, not cologne, something floral and unfamiliar. My heart didn't race. It didn't sink. It just stilled. I folded it carefully and set it aside, not ready for questions I wasn't brave enough to ask. I called Sophia that night. She's been my best friend since we were 12. I told her about Owen's wish, about the bike, about how I felt invisible in my own home. She was quiet for a long time, then said gently, "Are you afraid he's cheating?" I hadn't said that word aloud. It sounded too dramatic, too final. But instead of denying it, I said, "I don't know who he is anymore." We talked for over an hour. Sophia didn't try to convince me everything was fine. She just listened. At the end, she said, "Trust your gut. It's quieter than your fear, but it's usually right." The next morning, I found Daniel's laptop open on the dining table. He was in the shower. I didn't plan to look. I swear I didn't. But the screen lit up, and I saw the name, Liam. His best friend. His college roommate. His brother in everything but blood. The message preview read, "Last night." I can't stop thinking about it. My chest tightened. It could have been anything. Work. A memory. But I knew better. My gut spoke louder than my denial. Daniel walked into the room a minute later, towel around his waist, hair wet. He smiled, asked if I'd seen his charger. I handed it to him without a word. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. Owen ran in to show us a drawing he made, a new one. This time, the 3 stick figures weren't holding hands. They were standing apart. One of them was looking away, and just like that, I realized my son had seen the truth before I did. He was always good at hiding things. Not lies, not exactly, but pieces of himself. The kind of omissions that leave you questioning your own instincts. After that message from Liam, I couldn't ignore what I already knew. Something was happening behind my back, and the birthday wish wasn't just a coincidence. It was a warning. I told myself to wait, to gather more proof, to not jump to conclusions. But the truth was already gnawing at me. Daniel had changed. His silences had changed. Even the way he hugged Owen felt like performance now, like he was checking a box, not feeling the moment. I tried to distract myself with the routine, school drop-offs, grocery runs, replying to emails, but my mind kept circling back to that message. Last night. I can't stop thinking about it. I checked Daniel's texts when he left his phone unattended. Most conversations were clean, expected. But every few days, I'd see the same name, Liam. Buried under code words, vague language. Not enough to accuse him outright, but more than enough to confirm my fear. Liam had always been around. He was at our wedding. Gave the best man speech. Cracked jokes about how Daniel and he had survived everything together. I remembered how he used to crash on our couch after late nights. How he and Daniel would talk in low voices, separate from everyone else. It hadn't meant much to me then. Now, every memory had a second meaning. One evening, I asked Daniel directly, "When was the last time you saw Liam?" He hesitated, then said, "A few weeks ago. We grabbed dinner." That was a lie. He'd been out late just 2 nights ago. He didn't even bother to check the timeline. That's when I stopped pretending this was just in my head. I called Sophia again. She listened, then said something that stuck. "You're not crazy. You're just paying attention now." She was right. The problem wasn't new. I just couldn't unsee it anymore. The next time Daniel said he was going on a weekend work retreat, I didn't argue. I said, "Okay," kissed his cheek, and smiled like everything was fine. As soon as he left, I made arrangements. Babysitter for Owen. Tank full of gas. I followed him. It wasn't hard. He wasn't trying to hide, just counting on my trust to keep me in place. He drove for hours, out of the city, through narrow roads and tree-covered lanes. He stopped at a secluded rental cabin, one I recognized from an old Instagram photo Liam had posted years ago. I parked a distance away and waited. 2 hours later, Liam arrived. There were no hugs or handshakes. They kissed. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't accidental. It was familiar. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hands clenched on the steering wheel, watching the truth unfold without apology. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a secret life, and suddenly, it wasn't about betrayal in the usual sense. It wasn't just about me. It was about how long I had been excluded from a truth that shaped our marriage, our family. He hadn't just cheated. He'd rewritten the rules of our relationship without ever telling me. I drove back in silence, barely blinking. My world had been rearranged, and I was still expected to smile for Owen at breakfast. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor beside Owen's bed, watching him breathe. He looked peaceful. Untouched. But I knew that wouldn't last. He had sensed something already. His birthday wish was his way of reaching for a truth he couldn't understand yet. I wasn't sure what to protect him from anymore, the lie we'd built or the reality that was waiting to replace it. Daniel came home the next day like nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek, said the retreat was productive, and asked what was for dinner. I looked at him for a long time. Everything in me wanted to scream, to throw the truth in his face. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to decide who I was going to be on the other side of this. Was I the wife who begged for answers? Or the woman who demanded better? Later, I opened Daniel's laptop again and took screenshots, messages, timestamps, hotel reservations. I emailed them to myself. I wasn't preparing for revenge. I was preparing for clarity. There was no way back now. I wasn't just watching the pieces fall apart. I was finally choosing not to hold them together. He came home to the same house, the same furniture, the same quiet routine, but everything had changed. I had changed. I waited 2 days before saying anything. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I needed to hear the lie one more time to understand just how deep it went. When I finally asked, "Are you in love with Liam?" he didn't flinch. He looked at me like someone had finally turned off the noise in his head. His mouth opened, then closed. He nodded. Quietly. And I felt everything inside me go still. I asked him how long. He said 2 years. I asked why he didn't just leave. He said he was afraid. Of hurting Owen. Of facing himself. Of destroying what we had. I said, you destroyed it anyway. You just did it slowly enough to pretend you weren't watching. He said he was sorry. I didn't believe him. Not because he wasn't, but because sorry was too small for what he did. There was no yelling. No chaos. Just resignation. He offered explanations, but I didn't ask for them. I didn't need reasons. I needed distance. I told him to sleep in the guest room. That we'd talk about arrangements later. He agreed. It was the first time in months we agreed on anything. Telling Owen was the part one feared most. We sat him down on the couch between us. I said, Mommy and Daddy are going to live in different homes soon. But nothing changes how much we love you. He didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He just stared at his hands, then said, so my birthday wish didn't work. I wanted to fall apart, but I didn't. I pulled him into my arms and said, your wish helped Mommy see what was real. And that's what's going to make things better now. I don't know if he understood. But he hugged me back and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, I focused on moving forward. I made a list, bank accounts, custody details, co-parenting rules. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted structure. Something predictable in the middle of emotional wreckage. Daniel was cooperative, almost overly so. Maybe guilt made him agreeable. Maybe he was relieved it was all out in the open. Sophia came over often. She helped me pack boxes, purge closets, set up meetings with lawyers. She never said, I told you so. She just kept showing up, which is what I needed most. There was a day I broke down after folding Owen's clothes. She just sat next to me on the floor, silent, holding my hand until I stopped shaking. Daniel moved in with Liam. I told him I didn't want Owen introduced to him until we had legal clarity and emotional distance. He didn't argue. I appreciated that. But it didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't rebuild the trust. That was gone. I started seeing a therapist. At first, I wasn't sure what to say. I talked about Owen. About guilt. About how I felt stupid for not knowing. She said something that stayed with me, people don't hide things because you're blind. They hide things because they want to. I stopped blaming myself after that. Slowly, I began to rediscover who I was outside the role of wife. I went back to painting, something I hadn't done since college. I signed up for weekend classes, reconnected with old friends I'd pushed aside. My days became full again, not with distractions, but with decisions I made for myself. Owen adjusted better than I expected. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. I saw his laughter return. His appetite. His drawings changed, too, brighter colors, bigger smiles. Sometimes I caught him watching me carefully, like he was still trying to read the emotional weather in our home. But I always smiled back. Always answered his questions. Always reminded him this wasn't his fault. A year passed. His 9th birthday came around. He wanted a small party, just a few friends, some cupcakes, a new Lego set. Nothing elaborate. When I asked what he wished for this time, he shrugged and said, I don't need to wish anything. Everything feels okay now. I held his face in my hands and whispered, me too. That night, after he went to bed, I stood by the window and breathed deeply. I didn't feel broken anymore. Just whole in a different shape. I had walked through betrayal, faced truths I never saw coming, and I had survived. Not just for Owen. For myself. And in the silence of that room, I realized something I hadn't dared believe since it all began. I was free.